Well, thank you very much. I have to confess that it's one of my worst nightmares is to follow Steve Rubel anywhere. A couple of months ago, I was asked by a group to start blogging on their. I didn't do that. Blogging on a new website, and it was one of those schizophrenic moments where, I have a blog and I've been writing there a long time, and I said, what am I going to do if I do something different somewhere else? And so I put an outline together, which has really become the outline of this talk. I ultimately didn't do the writing at that other site, but I had the notion of starting a conversation about the topic, why the web matters. And so I started by asking a very basic question of myself, which I ultimately could not find the answer to, which is, what is the web worth? I better plug this in. How would we go about valuing the web if we were going to value it? So I actually did some research and discovered that we don't have any idea whatsoever how much money we're spending on the web. We don't really know how many servers are on the web. We don't know how much time people are spending on it really. We have some estimates. Just one fact, for example, struck me that a researcher at Stanford estimated that $8 billion was spent worldwide just powering the servers for the web in 2005. That's about as much as we spend worldwide on color televisions. It's a big number. But the point is that the web has grown so pervasively and has done so much to the world and changed the world so much that if, in fact, Martians came to Earth and said, we want to buy the web from you, I don't know how we'd go about valuing it. We've gone beyond a tipping point where we really don't know and can't go back from the investments we've made in the web. We've made enormous social and societal and business investments without really having a very good handle on how much we're really pouring into this. And if, in fact, Google were to buy every single blog post, comment, Twitter message, YouTube video, Facebook profile, it would be an incalculably large amount of money. So obviously that's the wrong way to talk about how we're going to value the web. Its measure of importance to us has to be approached a different way. And so from the very beginning I knew I would have to approach this from a different angle. I'm going to start by apologizing. Years of blogging has ruined me. As a result, I do not guarantee that I'm going to give you a nice logical argument with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and a nice tied-up bow, a neat package with results for you to take home. You're going to have to become one of those active participants, and you're going to have to unscramble some of the enigma that I'm sharing with you, which is what is going on the web today and what does it actually mean for us? You're going to have to do the work. You're going to have to become one of those participants, even if that's not naturally your character. And that's why I'm apologizing. I'm forcing you perhaps out of your comfort zone, but that's the nature of what's going on today on the web. So my thesis is that we have seen the movement of what some people call Web 1.0 across the world. And I'm characterizing it as a big metaphor. It's like being alone in a library. The original web model, the big hypertext document that Tim Berners-Lee envisioned, where everything... Why does this keep jumping ahead? Yes, it's telling me to speed up. That's good. That's a very good thing. The notion that there's a collection of all this information on the web, that's a great research tool, everything's linked together, you can wander around looking at bits and pieces of documents and getting an understanding of, how to knit, or, what was the name of Burkina Faso before they changed its name. All that kind of encyclopedic knowledge is there. But that's a very lonely experience because it turns out the Web 1.0 model was very, if you will, asocial. The notion that You were individually browsing around, going from place to place, finding things to read, or maybe making an occasional comment. But we've moved very dramatically in the last few years into Web 2.0, which is like the global village that Marshall McLuhan talked about back in 1964, actually, Understanding Media, where he said that the instantaneous speed up of society was going to be so profound, the movement towards a faster pace was going to be so significant that everything would sort of instantaneously collapse until the world felt like you were living in a village where you could know what was going on nearly everywhere. And in fact, it's all about people in a village. The fact is, this is really where we have gotten to, the emergence of a whole collection of new technologies, much more involving, the kind of thing that Steve was alluding to with the widgetization model he was talking about, which I actually refer to as a shift from the web of pages, the Web 1.0 model, to a web of flow, where information moves from place to place natively on its own, finding you and coming to you, rather than you spending your time wandering around looking for it. We're seeing that happening very profoundly. And as a result, the web has become a much more social place, a place in which more and more of what's going on is about people's relationships becoming the core of how they understand the world. That shift away from, the centralized media models that Steve alluded to earlier, actually, the movement away from mass media and mass marketing to a world in which people find out what they need to know from those people that are like them. Their network of connections is the primary source. So I refer to this as the people moving to the edge. People moving to the edge. We become the edgelings, the people who reside on the web, sharing with each other the content that we're generating for ourselves, for us, by us. And it's had a profound impact, as you all know, on the media world. I mean, the world of music, for example, has completely been obliterated by this movement onto the web. We're seeing the same thing, more so in the United States, with newspapers. I know it's significantly slower in Europe, but it is going to happen here as well, that people are finding more of what they need to know about the world through their network of friends rather than from centralized mainstream media sources. So it's all edge in the future. We've also seen this explosive rise in people's involvement through social networks. It's kind of interesting. If you go back far enough in time, I think it was in the book Linked that Basarabi dug up the original reference to the idea that everyone is connected in the world by 6 connections away. The 6 degrees of separation actually was dreamed up by a not very well-known Hungarian writer in the 1920s, amazingly early. And this was corroborated later on by Stanley Milgram in his studies. But the point is, we are all connected, and now we have mechanisms where we actually can use those connections. We can actually discover people. Steve's great example of finding out about the Hamburg airport by someone he already knew by doing a search on Google, because Google's finding all these links and discovering what's relevant based on the activities of all the participants out there, linking and other people's ratings of things. So everything becomes different. That was the name of the story, that the original idea of 6 degrees of separation was originally introduced. Everything is now different in a world where you really can take advantage of the fact that there are these connections and you can get to other people. And now that people they are being changed by it. They're not the same people they were 5 years ago after being connected. In my case, a digital nomad connected with hundreds of people worldwide. I'm not really the same American I was 10 years ago. I'm very different as a result of that. And for the better. So I'm going to jump into what I consider 4 important paradoxes. It's kind of like one-liners. But they're supposed to help you or pose problems for you to go off and think deeply about, I hope. The first one is the whole social revolution on the web is really about me first. Now that sounds selfish. When I first created this idea, I knew it was a good idea because 25 or 30% of the people who I talked to said that it sounded selfish, and they were mad at me just because of the title of this idea. But the reality, what it means is something very simple, which is In a social world, people start by putting themselves forward. They talk about their interests and their goals, their aspirations, their wants, who they know, as the basis of how to connect with other people, right? It doesn't mean that they're being selfish. It means they're self-oriented, and they have to lead with themselves, and as a result, then the world radiates out from them in a lateral fashion through their connections to other people who share their interests, wants, needs, desires, aspirations, geography, whatever. It's through our relationships with other people that we define ourselves and we find ourselves. My work is mostly with companies that are building social tools, and I explain to them that in order to help people do what they're trying to do on the web, tool developers have to be aware that people are in a voyage of discovery. They're trying to figure out who they are. They're trying to define who they are through increasingly richer relationships online. So this is the heart of what's going on, is that people are out there defining themselves through relationships with other people in order to figure out what they're supposed to be doing here on Earth. And that's good. So there's a downside of this global village, this world that is based on personal relationships with many, many people. It's not a democracy. It's not necessarily all sunshine and flowers. This is almost a tribal way of living your life. You have very strong relationships with people that you share things in common with, but there is very much a sense of me and mine versus the others. And we have to, at the same time, work to transcend that. We see a growth of people's awareness as they get more and more involved in the web, away from nationalism and towards, both at the same time, global awareness and local awareness, what some people call glocalization. That's a tongue twister. The combination of global and local, glocalization. So people's minds become shifted in what they think is important and how they manifest that. And also the other side of that is when you get involved with bottom-up belonging, people start to feel less affiliated with the existing power structures. They feel less in common with the Democratic National Party as opposed to the candidate they support. We see more of that all the time. It's shallow at the deep end of the pool. I mean, probably everyone here is aware of the concept of the long tail. And we've thought about the long tail in terms of things like the Amazon model of being able to sell books that are not tremendously popular but still have an ongoing niche audience that's going to be there for years and years. And as a result, the economics of retail has changed because of the nature of the web. But it's not just the economics of retail, it's the economics of human interactions, right? As people have more and more friends, you can have longer-lived relationships with people over time, but have like a niche friendship with them. My friend David Weinberger talks about continuous partial friendship, right? You can potentially push the Dunbar constant by using these tools today because the cost of participation in friendships has gone down. You can actively keep up hundreds of relationships with people with the same amount of time and energy. A few years ago, you would have been able to keep up with 50. Now, what does that mean? Are you shallow because you have so many friendships? Are you made richer because you have a diverse group of friends all over the world with common interests and different niches? I mean, I have a very large group of people I discuss music with, and another group of people I discuss technology with, another group I talk with about the web culture, let's say. And those groups may not be totally overlapping, but I can have ongoing deep relationships with them. So the economics of the web, which is tied to the economics of relationships increasingly, is also changing. It's not just about the longevity of books or music, it's also about the nature of longevity of relationships between people. So this is another part that changes with the long tail. Getting back to the theme of the conference a little, people's notion of time is changing because of the sense of the velocity, the pace of what's going on the web. The torrent of information that Steve was talking about, there's so much we're declaring email bankruptcy twice a week, it seems, just to keep up. So there is this sense that time is compressing and that we have to, there's almost a future shock aspect of that. The opposite thing that you see is the glimmering of the future is to look at the young people and what they do and how they interact and the way they use technologies. My teenage sons do not listen to voicemail. They just don't listen to it. It's gone because it's too much of a time sink. If you want to get him, you have to call him back again later. If it's important, it will surface. If you work on the flow model like Twitter, things that are important come by many times in the day. You don't have to bookmark anything. You just wait. Things that are important will come by 7 times. You can use that model as an efficient filter, especially since in something like Twitter, a flow model, you don't have to file anything. Things fall off the bottom. There's no work involved in it. Things just go by, you remain aware. So what we've known from the exposure to certain kinds of tools is that they have an impact on our consciousness. A great example is studies they've done with teaching people to use flight simulator tools. Even old people, if they're exposed to flight simulator tools, their driving abilities go up for a long period of time. It has a very pronounced effect. They have attained a different state of consciousness. My model is that these tools are changing the way we perceive the world. We are starting to think about the world. We make sense of the world in a different way. And it's actually a necessary shift because we have no option to the problems we have with overload. The only option is to surrender to a different model where the flow seems more natural. So the last comment is simple. Businesses will care about this because people are changing the web. We have invented the web to happen to ourselves. This is having an enormous impact in every sector. I alluded to media. That's a very obvious area. The entertainment business, another obvious area, but it's trickling through to all walks of life. It's having an impact everywhere. If you want to see the impact of this, look to the younger people, as I've said. That's the greatest source of inspiration of what's going to happen in the future, how it will change. So it's going to reach into everything like the etiquette of meetings, where people now open the laptop and do IM while they're having a meeting, all the way over to the way that companies are going to approach launching new products and how they're going to collaborate around building them. So I think my last comment is more aspirational. For us to make sense of this, we're going to have to change our sense of allegiance to each other. This is from Claude Lévi-Strauss, who wrote this in the 60s sometime. A well-ordered humanism does not begin with itself, but puts things back in their place. Whoops. Yes, I'll put it back in its place. Right in the middle. I can't see what I'm doing here. It puts the world before life, life before man, and the respect of others before love of self. So despite the fact that I say that social is about me first, ultimately me first brings you into closer relationship with other people. So in the last analysis, the way that we're going to have to judge how much the web is worth really comes down to how much do we judge our relationship to each other and the world that we're going to make with the new web. Thank you. Thank you.